Welcome to this tutorial video about deploying and running Apache Spark applications in dashDB local. This video is part of the tutorial for operationalization of Spark applications in dashDB local. In the first part of this video, we have seen how you can build a deployable Spark application out of a Jupyter notebook. So when you have done this, or when you have created a Spark application in any other way, this is the right starting point for you here. In order to understand the options for deployment in dashDB local, we go to the dashDB web console, Analytics, Spark Analytics, which gives us a landing page for all the things that we can do with Spark in dashDB. So for instance, we can open the documentation for transferring our Spark application code to dashDB. Here you can find the documentation of the according REST API of dashDB with examples how to use it with the curl tool. We are also going to provide you soon a simplified command line tool that you can use instead of using the REST API directly. If you want to see that, fast forward to the end of this video where I'm giving you a little preview of how this will look like. As you can see, the main parameters that you need to specify are the jar file for your Spark application, the host of the dashDB system, and the credentials for which you want to deploy. If you prefer, you can also get a proper REST API documentation using a Swagger interface, as you can see it here for this dashDB endpoints. Okay, so let's now deploy our jar file using curl and the REST API. So we are providing the credentials that we want to deploy this to. We are providing the jar file name that we have locally here in our system that we want to upload and store in dashDB. And we provide the location inside dashDB, which is the folder spark/apps. So now we have successfully deployed our Spark application. Now let's check how we can call it. We consult the documentation again, and we can find the REST API calls that we can do here documented with curl in order to call an application that we just have deployed. What we have to provide is again the credentials, the according endpoint, which is the public jobs submit, the jar file name that contains our application, and the class that contains the main method. And also for this REST endpoint for calling deployed applications, we have a fully fledged Swagger REST API documentation available for you. So let's do this from the command line now. We use curl and specify the credentials, user and password, the endpoint name for doing job submissions, the deployed jar file name that contains our build application, and finally also the class name with the main method. When the response tells us that the submission was successful, we can now switch over to the dashDB web UI again and watch what Spark is actually executing right now. We can see that for the user for which we submitted this application, there is a Spark cluster running. So we drill into this. And here we can observe the progress of the individual job stages of the Spark application until it finishes. From the perspective of the submitter of the application is running asynchronously, so you can find other endpoints, for instance, to monitor the status of the application that has been submitted via a REST call. Another useful REST endpoint that I would like to point out is for loading for deploying a sample applications into dashDB, so that you can start playing with applications right away without having to build one first yourself. In order to understand more details what your application is doing and to debug, you have another REST endpoint that allows you to look at the log files for your application. So for instance, you can just list which files have been created, like you can see it here, and after that you can also download individual log files and look at their content. So finally, I would like to give you a little outlook to a simplification to using all of these capabilities from the command line, which is our spark submit.sh command line tool. It is designed after and derived from the standard Spark submit tool that you find in open source Spark. So for instance, it provides you commands to upload files or to list files. Using a set of environment variables, you specify the credentials and the server name of your dashDB system. So let's check which files we have uploaded to our system right now. And we can see among the files is the jar file that we have created earlier on and deployed to our dashDB system. And now let's continue and do an actual submission of our Spark application using the Spark submit tool. We just specify the class name and the jar file name, and then we can run the command, and we can now also continue in using the status command in order to observe whether the application is still running, and when it has finally finished. We can also see that here with the command line tool. This closes our little deployment demonstration. Please come back and watch the other video tutorials for further capabilities and ways how to use Apache Spark with dashDB.